Now after you've got the side of the case off, you're going to go ahead and take out your grounding bracelet, and you're going to actually use that. You're going to go ahead and clip that to the side of the case, as you can see here, so that you are completely grounded, with the wrist strap securely placed around the wrist that you will be working on. It's up to your preference if it's your left or right. Just depends on you. Once you've got your alligator clip installed, you'll now see that you have the three main components of the inside of your basic computer case exposed. You'll see that we have the power supply unit up here. And you can see all the power cables that are coming out of that and connecting to the various devices in the motherboard. And you will see that you have the actual motherboard down here that is clearly exposed so you can see what all you're working with. And then lastly, you will see the third main component, which is your drives that are all connected with both power supplies and their data connectors coming from the motherboard. Step 3 is removing any type of expansion cards that are in place. Now if you're removing components, the book says to draw a diagram of all the cable connectors to the motherboard, expansion cards and drives, or as we talked about before, you can just simply take pictures. If you do take some pictures, you could work up some type of open up some software such as Word or PowerPoint or whatever to put some notes on there as well with the pictures that you've taken. So just use your imagination, your common sense, and just realize that there are various techniques for keeping track of your cable connections and placement of parts within a computer case, such as diagrams, pictures, etc. Alright, so here's some steps for removing your expansion cards. Remove any wires or cables that are connected to the card itself. Remove the screw that's holding the card to the case on the inside of the case there. And when you grab a hold of the card, make sure to grasp the card with both hands and remove it by lifting straight up. Don't try to rock it side to side or you can do some damage to that. And this is one of those parts where I talked about earlier where about being careful about not putting your fingers on the edge connectors. And you'll see these are usually like a copper looking connector on the end of those and RAM sticks and different parts. So once you've got this card removed, make sure to place it in an anti-static bag. If you're replacing the component, you'll have an anti-static bag already, but if not, as you are working throughout your career, make sure to keep some of those on hand for motherboards, hard drives, expansion cards. You might collect a lot of parts that you may never use or think you're not going to use, but then you're going to end up using them, and it's best to be safe by using those anti-static bags. We want to make sure we can do anything to prevent any form of ESD that may occur. Once you have your expansion cards removed, step 4 is to remove the motherboard, power supply, and drives, those three main components. So depending on the system, you may have to remove the drives and or power supply to get to the motherboard, and this is typically the case. Make sure you remove those other components and all of your power supply connectors off of your motherboard before ever trying to remove the motherboard. For one, you've got clearance issues and you want to make sure that you are going to be able to, once you pick up your motherboard, clearly take it out of there without having to have too much movement. And to remove your motherboard, simply unplug all the power supplies lines that are connected to your motherboard coming from your power supply unit. And this includes your data cables as well. Make sure you take those apart after your power supply lines. Once you've got all your power supply lines out of the way, you'll see that you just have a few lines left to disconnect, and those are going to either your hard drives, floppy drives, your optical drives, such as a CD-ROM or Blu-ray player. So do that. Once you have those, make sure you disconnect your lead wires that are going from your front panel of your computer case that are going to usually a corner of your motherboard. Disconnect those, and those are for like your speaker, your power LED light for when that gives you an LED look on the front of your book, on the front of your computer case that says your power's on or off. Just disconnect those. Once all of your wires are off there, take a look at your motherboard, and if you can pull up a diagram of your motherboard, you'll see the proper location of all of the screws, but look for all the screws and disconnect those. You'll have some standoffs, or if you want to call them spacers, that are separate from your motherboard, but those kind of go in between your motherboard and the metal casing or plastic casing of your computer case. So make sure you keep all of those in a central location so that when you go to put a motherboard back in, you put your spacers back before putting your motherboard and then the screws in. Once the screws are out, you should be able to easily lift your motherboard out of your computer case. And the book says to then take out your power supply unit based on when you first open up the case of the computer that you're working with, because not all cases and everything will look alike on the inside. You may need to remove your power supply prior to moving your motherboard, so it just depends on what you see once you open up the side of the case. But to remove your power supply from the case, there'll be some screws on the outside, the back part of the case, that you can just take off. Usually it's about 4 screws. And make sure that these screws are just the screws that hold the power supply unit to your computer case. Now sometimes you'll also find that there are some recessed slots that your power supply unit will slide into to also help it keep in place. So make sure not to just take the screws out and just yank on it. Make sure if you have those recessed slots that you need to take it out by sliding it out of those. And generally just by looking at it and grabbing it and moving it around a little bit, you should be able to see what direction you need to slide it to free your power supply unit from the computer case. Now that you have your motherboard and your power supply removed from your computer case, now it's time to remove the various drives. Look for screws on the side of each of the bays that hold the drive unit in place. You might need to just simply take off a couple screws, or there might be some holding tabs that have that in place after you take screws out. Sometimes you have these little plastic tabs you got to kind of squeeze together and slide out your drives as well. Generally speaking, your CD-ROMs, Blu-ray players such as those, you may have to simply just, once you get the screws removed, place your fingers behind the drive and push it forward straight out the front of the case. So check for any type of clipping mechanisms and see if there is a certain order that you may need to remove the drive bays due to the spacing. Also, you'll look around inside your case. Sometimes you have multiple drives that not only are on the front, facing the front of your computer, but are also in a vertical position that are hidden inside your computer case, such as if someone has a secondary hard drive in there just for storage. Now you have your clear computer case and you want to put everything back together. Essentially, work backwards from what you did. And this is how you can find sometimes that those diagrams or pictures that you took, or even a small video if you took a video, this will help you get everything back in the way that it should be. Generally speaking, it's going to depend on your inside your case, but as to if you put the power supply unit in or if you put your motherboard in first. The book says to install your components by power supply first, then all of your drives, then put your motherboard back in, and lastly put in any type of expansion cards that you removed. It just depends on your preference. Sometimes it's a lot easier to put your motherboard back in first, obviously making sure that you have put your spacers back in there and that you've got your motherboard placed in right with your screws all in the right place and never have any spare parts. But once you've got that motherboard in place, then it might be easier to then put your drives in, make your connections there, and then do your power supply unit because you have all those power cables. So it just depends on your preference. Just make sure you have a systematic order and you have it documented so that you don't have anything left out and that there are no spare parts. Standoffs and screws are one of the biggest parts that some technicians accidentally leave out. If you realize it, stop, back off everything you've done and put them back in place. You want to make sure that your motherboard never makes that connection to the metal surface. And having all of the screws back in place, make sure that your motherboard is securely in place. And you don't have to worry about any type of friction that could occur and that your motherboard is never going to fall. And it also helps support the structure of the motherboard.